My name is Dr. Jack Lewis. I'm a neuroscientist, and I'm on a journey to understand everything there is to know about the human brain. The human brain is the most complex part of our body. Many mysteries remain about how this most vital of vital organs controls every aspect of our lives. But over the last few decades, our knowledge has expanded in leaps and bounds.
That was a shock to the system.
Now we're getting ready to push it to the limits, finding out how our brains react to unusual conditions and surprising challenges.
This is the strangest experience of my life.
Let's do it. I'm setting out on a journey. A journey to meet some people with remarkable neurological conditions.
One of the most common questions is, how is it wired to your brain?
That give us a unique insight into the inner workings of the brain.
I discovered people who are able to remember almost every day of their life.
In this episode, we'll find out that there's much more to a face than meets the eye. I want to understand the relationship between our brains and faces. Imagine not being able to spot a loved one in a crowd. Or meet a man who can't recognize even his own family.
The crushing thing is a confidence.
We'll follow him as he searches for a cure. I'll join forces with a police super recognizer as we track down suspects in a crowd.
Alison, you're nicked.
And along the way, I'll be running my own experiments. I want you to tell me if either of those suspects you saw earlier are there in the lineup. And with the help of magician Pete Heat, we'll find out that when it comes to remembering a face,
I'm going to give you the power to know what their names are without even looking at them.
our brains can be very easily fooled. It's time to face up to your brain. The face, vital in so many ways for such an intensely social creature as us, enabling recognition in the blink of an eye, but also providing invaluable cues as to the person's internal state, and therefore, how best to communicate with them. With a remarkable number of muscles in our faces, we can express an almost endless diversity of emotions and feelings. And what's astounding is that we can tell people apart, despite the fact that all faces are made up of the same basic parts.
The fact that we can use these quite few features, a couple of eyes, a nose and a mouth, general shape, and yet differentiate all the people we know is quite remarkable.
And that's all thanks to the brain. It's evolved to spot these subtle but vital differences, unique combinations of muscle structure, facial features, and skin tone, which allows for super streamlined facial recognition. But do we take this remarkable ability for granted? Well, with a little help from magician Pete, that's a good place to start. With a wake-up call to remind us of the magic of facial recognition. Often, we just don't realise how good we really are.
Would you say you're good with faces? Like, say, if you bump into someone in the street that you might have met a few years
Not
ago.
particularly, no.
No? So you might not even know who they are, and you just have to nod along and kind of go, yeah, how's that thing that you do? Yeah. What about you? Same or?
I'm pretty terrible.
You're pretty terrible? Oh, good, because I'm exactly the same. I'm really bad. If you bumped into someone on the street that you'd maybe met at a party 5 years ago, and they started talking to you, do you think you'd know who they were, or do you think?
Face-wise, maybe.
Yeah.
Names, definitely not.
But I'm going to show you something to do with that, to do with what I'm talking about. I've got a stack of photographs here, all different people. Okay, so it's about 30, 40 pictures. Half of them are men, half of them are women. And on the backs of these as well, we've got all different, we've got their names. So we've got Michael from London or Matt from Birmingham. Even though you don't know these people, right, I'm going to kind of give you, this is going to sound weird, I'm going to give you the power to know what their names are without even looking at them. right? Okay, so sounds implausible, right? But we're going to give it a go. So, like, for example, one of the women in here is called Anne. Even though you don't know, hopefully you're going to tell me which one that is. So just use your intuition. So I'm going to spread through, and you're just going to stop me on one of the women, whichever one you think is called Anne. Go with your gut, right? So I'm going to spread through, okay? And again, even if you want me to change direction and go back, if you feel like I went too quickly or whatever, just say.
Stop. Yeah.
There? Yeah. And you both agree? You both think that's a no? Okay, you sure? Yeah. Okay. In fact, don't turn it over yet, but just take that off me so I can't cheat and do anything with it. Okay, so for example, if we'd have gone one woman further, if we'd have gone to this woman, that would have been Yvonne from Edinburgh, right? Okay, so if you hadn't have stopped me there, if we'd have stopped me even further still, it would have been this woman, maybe Philippa from Brighton, or you decided this woman was called Anne. Yeah. Turn it over.
No.
The only Anne in the whole stack, and you found her. Okay. So you do well, right? Okay, I'm going to try one with you. One of the men in here, actually a similar name. One of the men is called Andrew. Okay. And again, only one in the whole stack is called Andrew. Okay. So I'm going to spread through there again, and again, it can be one near the top, near the bottom, near the middle. Just stop me somewhere, wherever you want.
Stop.
Right there, you think this guy is Andrew, okay? And you could have stopped me anyway you wanted.
Yeah.
You don't want to change your mind? No? I'm not trying to make you, I'm just saying you can if you want. No?
No.
Okay, right, up to you. Right, are we happy? So you think that's Andrew? Don't turn it over yet, but take it off me. And again, just like before, so say this guy is Matt, right, if you'd have stopped me there, or this next guy, this guy is Tim from Coventry, right? Yeah. Again, they genuinely are all different names, Gareth, whatever, Simon. There is only one Andrew in the whole pile. Turn it over.
What?
That's Andrew from York. Turn it over.
Oh, look at it. Brummy Claire.
So that's a bit weird, right?
That is weird.
Okay, but with each of those, maybe that's just luck, because you've only got maybe 10, 15 of each sex to choose from. So maybe it's just luck that you happen to choose the right one, or maybe they look a bit like their name for whatever reason. So let's try and take that a step further. This guy on top, let's use him. He could have, obviously, any name in the world, right? There are thousands of different names that he could have, right? And he could be from any... he's from Britain, I'm going to tell you that, but he could be from any city or town in the whole of Britain. I'm going to try this with you, actually, if I can.
Okay.
So firstly, I want you to just think of any... don't say it, just think of any first name that he could have. And think of any city or town in the whole of Britain, so don't tell me again, okay?
Yeah.
Sure?
Yeah.
So you're thinking of a name?
Yeah.
And you're thinking of either a town or a city somewhere in Britain, okay?
Yeah.
Don't tell me yet, but just hold on to that so I can't do anything, I can't cheat, I can't change anything. For the first time, can you name out loud the name that you think this guy, that you decided his name was?
Clive.
You decided he was called Clive?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting, all right, okay. Clive, that's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Exactly.
It's a crying shame. And where is Clive from?
Eastbourne.
Okay, Clive's from Eastbourne, of course he is. You could have said any name, you could have said any place in it.
Oh,
Let's have a look. Turn it over.
Oh. What the heck? That's weird.
Show the camera.
How did you do that? That's weird. Clive from Eastbourne.
To see that for the first time was really strange for me, really strange. I think it was good. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I don't know how the hell he got that. That is amazing. That is amazing.
Now, this may just be a trick, but behind it is a bigger truth. We're amazing at processing faces. In the last 3 minutes, you've registered a number of faces, making unconscious decisions about their age, personality, and background. For us neuroscientists, unraveling how and why this happens gives us a remarkable insight into how we interact with each other. But what would happen if this process went wrong? How would you cope if you couldn't recognize any faces at all? There are 3 vital phases to identifying whether or not we know a face. Number 1, you look at the object and all of its various features and recognize that it's a face in the first place. Secondly, automatically at a subconscious level, your brain will look up that face in regard to all the other faces you've come across to tell you whether it's familiar. And thirdly, you pull up all of the relevant information relating to that face in order to know their name, what your past interactions with them have been, and so on. If any one of these three processes breaks down, it can be absolutely catastrophic to our experience of everyday normal life. 1 year ago, architect David Scott suffered a stroke, which rendered him face-blind, a condition that's also known as prosopagnosia.
Prosopagnosia, the impact is massive, and for something which is not visible for a sufferer, the impact it has upon your life is just, at times, it's horrendous.
He can see perfectly well, but is unable to recognise the faces of anyone he knows, including his closest family and friends.
I mean, it just changes your whole relationship with the whole world and people. Anything which might give an improvement, no matter how small or even how brief, temporary, has to be explored.
David has come to meet me as he embarks on a journey to try and find a cure for his condition. But before we can begin, he sets himself the challenge of finding me in the crowd, using his own somewhat unconventional methods.
Actually, it could be, yeah. I think it is. Excuse me, are you Jack?
I am. Hello.
I'm David.
How did you do that?
The eyebrow. Your right eyebrow.
So what is it about these eyebrows specifically?
See there?
Oh, that little bit sticking out?
Yeah, the bit there. And also there's it, but I don't know whether that is just...
No, that's a rugby injury. That's
so
my eyebrow got
and
split.
then the other thing I sometimes will do is I will look at the shape of how bowed the lip is.
Because usually it would be the alignment of the eyes with the nose. Instantly, that's a face.
Yeah.
Do you still have that ability to recognise this as a face?
Yeah, I know that's a face.
Okay, but it's the actual identity
It's
of
the
this
bits that
face.
put it together. Yeah, so basically I can look at that now and go, yeah, like fine. But what I don't, if say I don't see is the wrong word to use, I can't. They don't all live together in my mind as one image.
Okay.
So for instance, so you're now easy. It's easy for me to look at you and go that little bit over the eyebrow.
As a test, I've put together a newspaper filled with faces which should be familiar to David. Let's see how he fares. Can you identify this person or any of these guys?
I don't know. I've got no idea. That there,
you glanced at a picture of your own face.
Oh, I passed myself the whole time, yeah.
David has also failed to notice his wife on the front page.
I would struggle to pick her out in a crowd.
Your own wife? You'd struggle to pick her out in a crowd?
If I didn't know what she was wearing. If I'd seen her in the morning go out wearing, I don't know, a light-coloured coat and something like that, and then I would focus, the first thing I'd look for is the clothing.
Right. Clothing first, rather than the face you've looked at every day, more or less.
Yeah.
How many years have you been married?
22.
22 years. And such a familiar face.
Oh, no, yeah, I mean, we've, on the times I go to the supermarket, I've lost her in Waitrose.
Really?
And the only way I can find her is by looking for the clothing.
Looking for the
And
clothing.
the body shape.
Right.
So the face is useless.
Later on, we'll rejoin David as he attempts a pioneering new technique to try and cure his face blindness. So even the people closest to David appear alien to him. But for the rest of us, how strong is our impulse to see faces? Well, have a look at this. A simple white mask. We have eyes, nose, and mouth. It looks like a face, but when it starts to turn, something unusual happens. As the mask rotates, there should be a wrong side and a right side, but there isn't. We get the two sides of the face mixed up. This is called the hollow face illusion. Our bias of spotting faces is so strong that even when we know we're looking at the inside of the mask, our brains ignore the cues, such as shading or shadows, that would suggest something's awry. So what's going on? Let's start from the beginning. How do we recognize faces? Well, the simple answer is our brains are made to find faces in any environment. It's an inbuilt primal part of our neural wiring diagram. But given that infants have so much trouble recognizing even the most basic of patterns, how in the world do they zero in on something as complex as a face? We've set up our own baby lab to find out. Wish me luck. No one has worse manners than babies. They just won't stop staring. Fresh out of the womb, we humans love faces. We just find them absolutely mesmerizing. An infant just minutes old will instinctively turn towards a face. We have a deeply ingrained preference for them. But surely for a toddler, there's nothing more tantalizing than a toy. So in this simple experiment, we're going to show our babies a series of pictures of faces to see if they find those more interesting than anything else.
This is Nancy and she is 10 months.
This is Alice and she's 6 months old.
This is Rudy and he's 9 months old.
This is Lyra and she's nearly 12 months old.
We're presenting our troupe of tots with 2 simultaneous photos. One of them a human face and the other a toy. Which of these images will entice our infants the most? The results are unanimous. All of our panel, including those who can't yet walk, are intuitively drawn to the faces. The reason for this is a simple case of human evolution. We've adapted to lock onto faces to aid us in seeking out safety, specifically to secure the support and protection provided by the familiar faces of our regular carers. But how can a baby distinguish between a face and something very similar to a face? The fact is that from birth they can't. And that's where our next test comes in. In this experiment, we're going to see if our babies choose to look more at the face-like images than all the others. We're starting with the youngest of our panel. And it's immediately apparent that they're just as intrigued by face-like objects as actual faces. As we move through the age range of our babies, we begin to notice a change in the level of interest. The older the infants are, the less fixated they seem to be with the face-like images. This is because, from birth, we're what science describes as broadly tuned to faces. Babies simply don't make the fine discriminations that we're accustomed to as adults. So if it's a bit like a face, that is quite sufficient to draw a baby's eye. So whilst we're programmed to understand the general blueprint for the features that make a face, it takes time to fine-tune the recognition process for specific faces. Although we may lose our fixation with them, our innate ability to see faces in ordinary objects doesn't just stop when you grow up. Take a look at these images. You see faces? If you do, then you're experiencing something called pareidolia. Anyone who's ever looked up at the clouds and spotted 2 eyes, a nose and a mouth has felt the pull of pareidolia.
There is a system within the brain that recognizes faces, and it zeroes in on a particular configuration where it sees 2 eyes, a nose and a mouth in a particular shape. And that's why face recognition is so remarkable, but sometimes that system can overwork and start seeing faces in clouds, in biscuits, etc.
Our brains are highly tuned to see faces. So when that process is interrupted and every face becomes a blank canvas, the world becomes full of strangers. David Scott is on a journey to try and find out why his brain works so differently from everyone else. He's arranged to meet Dr. Ashok Jansari, and for the very first time, he's about to find out which part of his brain was affected by his stroke and how badly. He's never felt ready to look at his brain scans until now.
This is us going down into your brain, and one thing is that what's on the left-hand side of the screen is actually your right half of your brain, and what's on the right-hand side is the left half of your brain. It's mirrored, yeah. The dark bits here mean that that part of the brain is okay. The lighter grey part here is the parts that were damaged when you had your stroke. And what we see in your brain is that there's more damage on the right-hand side than on the left-hand side.
The damage to David's brain includes an area known as the fusiform face area, within a part of the brain called the fusiform gyrus.
And that is indicative of the prosopagnosia, because that's the part of the brain that's effectively face recognition central.
Professor Jansari believes disruption within a specific part of the brain could be causing David all this trouble. Face recognition is a complex process, involving a variety of structures within the brain, including the fusiform face area. When we look at a face, the visual information is converted into electrical nerve signals in the back of the eyeball. These signals are sent via the thalamus to various brain structures for processing, including the occipital lobes at the back of the brain and the fusiform face area on the underside, shown here as the yellow areas inside the fusiform gyrus. The occipital lobes process visual information. They actively create the picture that you see, but don't interpret the detail of what the picture is. The fusiform face area, seen here in yellow, works as a dedicated facial recognition system. It filters and recognizes complex facial patterns. And in cases of prosopagnosia, the fusiform face area may be malfunctioning.
Okay, so David, how do you feel now that you've seen your brain scans and seen the areas of damage?
I don't know, there's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
I can't relate to my brain.
Have you got any more questions for me?
I don't think so, no. That's been most interesting, thank you.
Well, I'm glad it's been infused. Well, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank
really
you,
nice
thank you for your
meeting
time.
Okay, goodbye.
David is one step closer to understanding why his brain now works so differently from the rest of us. And later, we'll follow him to see if there's any way to find a cure.
On the left, I think.
And who do you think that might be?
I think it might be one of my daughters.
So for me, the most interesting thing about David's case is that it shows us that this special area of the brain, the FFA, fusiform face area, has evolved over millions of years to enable us all to instantaneously know whether or not a face is familiar. Now, David, of course, can see other objects absolutely fine. It's the very specific ability to identify faces that's been disrupted in his brain. And this is, of course, extremely important for us humans because we need to know whether that face is familiar or not in order to know whether it's friend or foe, to know whether we know that person vaguely or very, very well. We're such a social species that if you get that wrong, it can have huge social penalties. It could even endanger your life. So next time you glance at someone and your face immediately lights up with recognition, bear in mind it's all thanks to this important but tiny part of your brain. We may have an innate ability to recognize faces, but as you're about to see, only if we pay proper attention. You'd think that being almost 2 meters tall, with a unique taste in clothes, Pete would be pretty easy to remember. Well, think again.
Sorry, do you live around here?
Yeah.
Do you know where Nile Street is? I think it's in the south lanes.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, I do actually. So.
In fact, sorry, yeah. Where are we? Is this us here or are we there?
We're about. So we're just along here, basically.
Okay.
Hey guys,
watch out!
your backs. Sorry, so we're
yeah, so
here,
we're just here, and then you want to go basically along here.
Which is that way?
Yep.
Okay.
Go up, and then it's just on there and around the corner.
Okay, brilliant.
I'm looking for Nile Street, which is in the south lanes, apparently. Yeah, is that like? Are we? Where are we? Sorry, mate. Watch out.
Sorry. So that way.
Nile Street. Just right.
Yeah.
So is it the south lanes are down there? Is that right? Or? Yeah.
Sorry, guys, coming through.
Oh, watch out.
Sorry. Okay, so this way?
Yeah, it's that way, and then you just basically turn right.
Right.
So down there, right, and then up.
Sorry, right. So, all right. So we're.
There's a common misconception. You may think that you're aware of everything coming into your brain from your eyes from moment to moment.
Perfect. All right. Cheers, mate. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
The truth is, that the brain can't keep up with the total amount of information coming in from your eyes. Your experience from moment to moment is drastically filtered, summarized, and then finally prioritized to make it more manageable. And this means that when it comes to faces, we only remember those people who we think may be significant. So what have we found out so far? Well, although our brains are hardwired to see faces, we're highly selective about the faces we choose to remember. And when this part of the brain's highly sophisticated machinery goes wrong, it can make the world a very confusing place. So are we really reliable as eyewitnesses to a crime? What are the features that stick in our brains? What do we remember about a face? To find out, I've pulled together my very own group of witnesses to see a police lineup. Okay, everyone, I have a very straightforward task for you. What facial features are you most easily recognized by? I'm going to show you two faces of a pair of suspects. I want you to commit them to memory. Now, you're only going to see them for a few seconds, so make sure you're paying attention. The images shown to our amateur sleuths show suspects' faces with their peripheral features removed. Okay, so hopefully you've got those fixed in your memory. We're now going to show you a lineup of 5 suspects. They're all going to come out one by one. And I want you to tell me if either of those suspects you saw earlier are there in the lineup. So if one of these individuals is someone you saw earlier out of those 2 faces, which one does your inkling point you towards?
The first one starting from the right.
Mm-hmm. He was shown, he was there in the scene of the crime.
And it was the one on the left.
Okay. How about you, Mike? Who do you think it was?
Exactly the same as what Bego said. Guy on the right, and he appeared left image.
Okay, that's great. You've all done fantastically. Clearly, your facial recognition is brilliant. So even with key features removed, like hairlines and ears, the witnesses are still good at recognizing faces. Our ability to do this is a classic example of unconscious cognition. We don't have to think about it. Facial familiarity just happens. So next up, we've got 2 more suspects. I'm going to get you to study their faces again, just for a few seconds. So there's one dodgy looking bloke, and here's the other. Okay. Did any of you notice anything unusual about them?
They didn't have eyebrows.
Did that in any way affect your confidence in being able to figure out who these suspects are? It did. So track, either of those 2 faces you saw earlier, can you see them here in this police lineup?
The one that was on the right had a very distinctive nose.
Yeah.
And I can't see that nose.
Okay.
But it could have been the camera angle. But the lack of eyebrows was very confusing.
Okay.
If I was a police lineup, I'd have to say that none of those matched the 2 pictures I saw. So I'd say they're not in there.
How about you, Bego? Do you have any guesses?
I would go for the guy on the far left.
Correct. 3 of the 4 of you have spotted that one of these people is indeed one of the eyebrowless individuals from earlier. But what about the other one? Is that person in the room right now? Yeah, you guys are kind of maybe looking in the wrong direction. I was sure you were going to get this. It's actually me. You didn't recognize this was me?
No.
Not even a subtle hint of recognition?
And I can still, now that I know, I can't even see it either.
Even now, I'm stood next to it.
Yeah.
The eyebrows are a very humanising feature, and that kind of image to me looks very, you know, not alien. I guess not to disrespect people without eyebrows, but it's very, very hard to associate that as a person.
Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking it's your eyes, your nose, and your mouth, the classic facial features. But in actual fact, the eyebrows are incredibly important. The T-shape formed by your nose and your eyebrows is the principal way that we assemble a face in our mind's eye, and specifically one face in particular. So without the eyebrows, your face is virtually unrecognizable. Now it's your chance to be the eyewitness. Just tell me which of these faces is smiling and which one is angry. Easy, right? Well, look again. They're known as Dr. Angry and Mr. Calm. But what happens when you change your perspective by backing away from Pete? You should see that Dr. Angry and Mr. Calm swap places. But as we move closer again, they'll swap back. This is a pretty cool illusion. But what's going on? Normally, when we look at something, we process it according to its position. Close up, we can see the fine details, while further away we see the bigger picture, or the coarser information. Each of the faces in the pictures is a mashup of two images. On the left, the angry face is just represented by coarse detail, so we see it only from a distance. But the calm face is made up of fine detail, which we can only see close up. The right-hand face has been created the other way round. So let's face it, both you and my lineup of eyewitnesses have been pretty unreliable at spotting a face. Now, imagine if you had the ability to remember every single detail of someone's face and what they were wearing. If you're especially good, you might be what's known as a super recognizer. Less than 1% of the population have this extraordinary innate ability. So it's time to meet the king of the lineup, the master of spotting a face, the ultimate eyewitness. Police Constable Gary Collins of East London's Hackney Gangs Unit is the Metropolitan Police's most prolific eyewitness. He's identified over 800 suspects in the last 10 years. He's part of a new breed of super recognizer cops. Nice to meet you.
All right.
Yeah, very well, thanks. Their prime objective is to spot known offenders from both CCTV footage and live situations. Gary's incredible skills give us a unique insight into the potential abilities of our own brains. So can you share with us any of your greatest successes, obviously without breaking any confidentiality?
Because of the type of work I do, a lot of the stuff is serious offences like murder, attempted murders, stabbings, knife crime, gun crime, and where the victims in these incidents won't report to police, we only have the CCTV to go on.
What kind of materials do you work with? You mentioned CCTV. Presumably there's a sort of wide variety of raw materials you need to search through.
Obviously we use a lot of social media, mobile phones. Obviously everyone's got mobile phones these days, and the quality, the cameras on them is a high quality. We do a lot of gang stuff, a lot of videos on YouTube. A lot of people are masked up in them videos, got their faces covered, just their eyes showing.
A still from a piece of CCTV footage is, if the news is anything to go by, invariably pretty grainy, pretty poor quality resolution. Yet you can still identify people on the basis of that.
It's very hard for me to explain how I do it, but I can look at the image, look at the grainy CCTV, what I've got, and say, yeah, well, that is that person.
Presumably, to help you recognise a face, it's best to have it face on, or is that not always the case?
It is, obviously, the clearer the image, if it is face on, it's better. And I've been sent images before, a still image, and I've looked at it and I said, no, I don't recognise the person. He looks familiar. I can't put a name to him. I've been asked to see the moving footage, so I believe the moving footage is always a lot clearer. It could be a split second where they turn their head one way, which might assist me in identifying them. So the moving footage is always a lot clearer to me.
I guess that's interesting, because if you think about it, the evolution of the human brain, up until a couple of hundred years ago, there were no still pictures of anyone. Everyone was always in motion. You know, if you're moving around your community, whether or not you can recognise a face, it's always on the basis of dynamic information, so that makes sense.
It does. I mean, and you see, in moving footage, you can see the way the person walks. I mean, I've identified people from the back of them just by the way they walk or the way they hold themselves.
At face value, Gary seems to know his stuff, but I've devised a challenge that will test him to the limit. I'm showing him mugshots of 10 potential suspects, 3 of whom we've planted in the busy square outside. Feeling confident?
I am, yeah.
Scale of 1 to 10?
9.
He could just be putting on a brave face. I want to see if he can spot these suspects from 100 metres away without referring back to the original photos. So go on, run me through. What's the first thing you would do in order to take in all these people as quickly as possible?
It's just scanning, basically just scanning the area, scan as many people as you can.
This simple technique works for Gary because he's a super recognizer. But at this range, I'm having trouble even seeing faces at all, let alone identifying them.
There's a chap at the bus stop up there. I think he was number 3, I think, in the photographs.
Shay, I think you've been busted. Could you give us a wave? Well done.
That's one.
Miles away. It's actually thought that super recognizers might have something interesting going on in the very same brain areas as those with face blindness. They just occupy the opposite end of the spectrum. Instead of struggling to identify anyone, they actually recognize everyone.
Lady by the scarves down there with the grey rucksack.
Alison, you're nicked.
Only one more suspect on the run.
The chap there with the blue bobble hat.
Oh,
I think
very
he was
good.
number 2
Mike,
or
could
3.
you turn around and give us a wave?
Well done. I mean, we even stuck him in a bobble hat to make it harder for you. I think this proves why you're the best in the business.
No, it's brilliant. No,
Good
thanks
job.
very much, Yep.
Well
Thank
done,
you.
Gary.
Thank you.
Super recognizer. It's remarkable to think that in a world of over 7 billion people, no two faces are exactly alike. Every single face is individual. It's thought that we evolved to have such distinctive and unique faces to help us recognize each other by sight, as opposed to scent, like most other animals. And not only have our faces evolved to become more recognizable, our brains have developed to perceive faces faster. And super recognizer Gary could be on the front line of this evolutionary progress. His ultra-advanced facial perception could boil down to an overactive or perhaps hyper-connected fusiform face area.
When we're recognizing objects in the outside world, what we're effectively doing is putting together a visual jigsaw. So for example, when we're looking at a chair, what we see is a flat surface, some things sticking out, and we see a back area. And we add those bits up to work out that this is a chair. However, for human faces, what happens is that we see the whole, and we think that that happened within the right hemisphere.
And in Gary's case, this part of the brain is far more developed than the rest of us. David, on the other hand, has discovered that his fusiform face area is damaged, and this could be the reason why he's had to resort to alternative methods in order to spot a face.
In cases of prosopagnosia, what we believe is that that system that sees the whole is damaged. And as a result, what happens is that the brain has to revert to that other system that sees the parts, and it tries to work out what that is.
So David has had to learn how to recognize people using a completely different set of tools.
I'll avoid going into a room, being the first person going in. I'll go in behind people, or I'll wait until to hear people talking. Then I can place people within the room. I look for out of a whole range of stuff. I'll pull in 2 or 3 that I think are going to be useful.
And then triangulate the identity on the basis of...
But that can change every time I meet them. I can't control the things that I recognise people with, and that sometimes is a little bit tough and/or embarrassing, because when people find out or hear that's what I'm doing, they immediately want to know, so what do you recognise about me? And sometimes I'm not going to tell them. I'm not going to, you know, the classic one is the lady with the large bust and the rather low-cut top when we were out one evening. That was the way that I could tell her. It's such a simple thing, but such a difficult thing for someone to understand.
It is hard to wrap your head around until you realise that the brain's divided up into different functional compartments. Each of them do a different job. And if you've just had damage to the part of the brain that processes specific visual information, everything else about you is the same. It's just your access to that facial information has been damaged.
I'm no no dafter, no cleverer than I was before. It's just this very narrow band, but it penetrates a lot of your life without realising
But
it.
of course, it must be hard work.
Yeah, it's a lot of hard work, and it is tough. And that's the thing, it's very difficult to explain to people how tough it is. Really tough.
Clearly, David is struggling to come to terms with his new way of life. As a result, he signed up to trial a brand new approach to treating face blindness. David is hoping that an experimental drug therapy might be the answer to his problem. Dr. Sarah Bates specialises in neurodisorders, characterised by face processing impairments.
The technique that we're looking at today is using intranasal inhalation of the hormone oxytocin.
When oxytocin is given as a drug, it's usually to induce labour or to encourage bonding between mother and infant. This has led specialists to suspect that it could be useful for promoting recognition. It's already proved to be successful in patients born with face blindness, but Dr. Bates and her team have little experience of cases of acquired face blindness through brain trauma.
We've tested one person so far, and we also noted a significant improvement in that individual. So our hope is today that we will find a similar pattern with David. Come and take a seat, David, if you could sit for me and just get in front of the laptop. I'm going to ask you to inhale 6 puffs of this spray. So if you tilt your head back slightly, cover the other side, and then 3 puffs up each side.
Once the hormone is absorbed into his system, David's facial recognition is put to the test.
One on the left, I think.
And who do you think that might be?
I think it might be one of my daughters.
Test subjects can't know their scores until the end of the experiment.
No idea. Absolutely. One on the right.
This procedure is so experimental, the possibility of success is completely unknown.
I think that's Sharon on the left. I end up divorced at the end of this, couldn't I?
We'll find out soon if the therapy worked or if David will have to settle for a life without faces.
I'm worried that he will be disappointed because he hasn't resigned himself to living with prosopagnosia. He definitely wants help.
To recognise people, David has to rely on a completely different set of features to the rest of us. But thankfully, he has no problems recognising those all-important facial cues that are absolutely vital when we interact. We're all highly attuned to what people's faces tell us. Take this simple trick. Pete is about to show you a simple disappearing ball trick. Now see if you can spot what's happening in slow motion. If you were tricked, then you were looking more at Pete's face and where he looked than at his hands. We have an instinctive tendency to look at human faces because they're packed with so much useful social information. For example, we have the urge to follow Pete's gaze because it provides potentially vital information about things we might have missed. Once Pete has our attention, he's got us fooled. Over the course of our journey, we've learned that facial recognition is profoundly important for our survival and success as a species. So much so that our brains have developed ways to fast-track the process of face perception itself. And when this system is disrupted, we have to resort to alternative methods to seek out those whom we know. But recognizing people by their clothes, hair color, or vital statistics is no match for our own inbuilt, hyper-quick, automated facial recognition system. Without which, architect David Scott is unable to even recognize his own wife. Today, he's taking part in an experiment which could potentially change his life forever.
That's got my frown, but it hasn't got my scar. But I'm going to go with it. It's me. The crushing thing is the confidence, isn't it?
In a bid to boost his facial recognition abilities, he's participating in a cutting-edge drug test. But with research this fresh, there's no guarantee of success.
So, before you had the oxytocin, you scored 7 out of 10 on that one, and then afterwards you scored 4 out of 10.
After oxytocin, so yeah.
Oxytocin, so it didn't actually benefit.
Yeah.
David's score was 40%, which is less than if he were to pick the faces at random. The oxytocin hasn't worked. He's the first patient ever to see no improvement from the treatment.
I was a little bit disappointed with the results from the test, but being realistic, I probably wasn't surprised. What can you say?
But all is not lost for David. The last experiment may have failed, but there are still plenty of potential fixes in the pipeline for sufferers of prosopagnosia.
The more we study the condition, the better we're going to be able to create new strategies and rehabilitation techniques. We're also hoping that we'll be able to develop technologies that can help people with prosopagnosia.
Since the oxytocin tests, David has been working with a software company to develop new strategies for facial recognition using smart glasses. And he's visiting today with his daughter.
There seems to be a fantastic use, a positive use of technology.
Whether or not this particular strategy is successful, David recognises that the future is getting brighter for those with face blindness.
Just, you know, that little bit of assistance can help so much with like self-confidence and just your place in the world.
David's story speaks volumes for just how much we should value our brain's unique relationship with faces. From knowing which faces are worth remembering,
Watch out. Sorry.
Okay.
and the features we automatically hone in on to do this effortlessly, to our extraordinary ability to spot them everywhere. We are all constantly bombarded by new faces, and our ability to remember them is quite remarkable. In the average lifetime, we'll recall over 10,000 different faces. Face perception has always played a central role in social interaction, informing us about the identity, age, gender, race, mood, attractiveness and friendliness of a person, all at a glance. But what David and Super Recognisers tell us about facial recognition is that it's a remarkable and complex process that gives us a unique insight into how our brains work.